Welcome to the Manufacturing Masters Podcast with your host, Allison DeFord.
Greg Mischio is the founder of Windbound. If you have not heard of him yet or interacted with him on LinkedIn, you've really got to do that. He's also an expert on the Manufacturing Masters platform. And one of my favorite quotes of his is, you don't just need content, you need the right approach. And that's what we're going to dive into today on this episode of the Manufacturing Masters podcast. He created a framework called the Digital Twin. He will tell you, show you how to replicate your sales team without adding any bodies. And some manufacturers get scared by this. They don't understand it. So we're going to break it down today. He makes it super easy to understand. It makes so much sense. And let me tell you what, he has the case studies to prove that it makes sales easier and more sustainable long-term. So join me and my good friend, Greg Mischio. Everybody, here we grow. Greg is in the house. And if my kids heard me even try to say anything remotely cool like that, they'd go, please stop. Right.
Yeah. Don't do that. Don't ever do that again. That's what I always get.
No. Yeah. Hopefully they won't listen to this. I am so stoked to have you today, Greg Mischio, because Mr. Windbound, Mr. Sales, Digital Twin, I think there's something so special that you bring, not only as an expert on the Manufacturing Masters platform, but a very passionate and committed expert on LinkedIn and, to manufacturing in general. And you and I think, have just such a great synergy and appreciation for each other. We both are all about content and strategy. And I would love to dive in today and have you talk about the digital twin strategy, right? The fact that you're helping people duplicate their sales team without adding any bodies. Is that how you describe it?
Yes. I mean, I think that the whole idea came about many moons ago. I think it was like during COVID. I went to it was a mastermind, Chris Lukey, our buddy Chris Lukey of Manufacturing Happy Hour. Great human. Had a guest on his show, was in a Zoom session, and the guy was talking about digital twins for manufacturing, which is a digital recreation of a product or a process. And at that point, I've been doing all this research and working with manufacturers, and they're all sales-driven organizations, primarily, heavily duty, and a lot of them are resisting or just not picking up on digital marketing. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, you know what we need? These manufacturers need to make a digital twin of their sales team. And ran it by Chris the next day, and he's like, dude, if you don't use that, I will. So yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm going to explore this. So I remember, like, in the early days, then I just started to kind of explore the idea and just develop it. And it kind of, like right when we first came out, we thought that the whole idea is, okay, well, let's actually try and make this digital twin of a salesperson with our content. I will say, before I get into that, the one thing I've learned is manufacturers are very literal. So if I go to them and I say, we're going to make a digital twin of your sales team, they're thinking I'm going to make that, like, C-3PO come out and, mimic their sales team. And I'm like, no, conceptual content, blogs, videos, things like that. And so I have to kind of pull back on that concept and make sure that I introduce it to them when we've got some time to dive deeper, like we are right now. But I remember when I came up with it, and then I was like, oh, and we can have content that just mirrors the process, gets people to know you, like you, trust you. And I was getting ready to go on a podcast with Sam Gupta. And, Sam will tell you what he's thinking. And he's not going to hold back. And he's like, it just sounds like a gimmick. He didn't say that bluntly, but he's like, you got to be careful, because if it doesn't work, or, there isn't more to it than just the know you, like you, trust you, it's just going to be a gimmick. And you hear something like that and you kind of wince and you're like, get your guard up. And then I'm like, dang, anytime something like kind of irks me, I'm like, now, why is it bothering me? Maybe it's because it's the uncomfortable truth. And so I just kept probing on it and trying to develop the concept. And then I started to learn more about how sales really works, and started to read like the Challenger series, the Challenger book, and the Challenger sale. Started to read neuro selling and books like that, New Sales Simplified, and then really started to tweak our strategy more. And like, I felt like it was making me a better marketer. And
Wait, marketing cares about sales? What?
well, I would even up that and say marketing can learn from sales.
Yes, and vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that alignment. So I just feel like we've really kind of developed the approach, and now we're at a stage now where like we're really starting to get into account-based marketing, and really figuring out how to zero in on, and just zeroing in on how that will work with content marketing, because that's just a natural, pair right there. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and we're just continuing to build on the concept.
Well, and you were on my previous podcast, MFG Out Loud, and I realized it's 3 years since we recorded that episode. So you've been talking about the digital twin strategy for 3+ years that I know of. And I rewatched it, and because I wanted to see, like, all right, I'm going to ask him, what's changed? What have you learned? All this stuff. And I think what's super important to remind manufacturers who are listening is that 3 years ago, you said 70% of sales are happening online. The research, right? The vetting, all of that is happening before they ever pick up the phone or fill out the contact form on your site. And then you said something, I think it was a Gartner study or something, that said by 2025, so that's only in 2 years, it'll be 80%.
Yeah.
And are you still getting manufacturers resisting, right? Because I feel like the digital twin brings sales and marketing together. It bridges that gap. But I feel like there's probably still resistance, because you talked about that 3 years ago, that people thought, oh, well, is this going to replace our flesh and blood sales team? Like, I don't understand.
I think there is resistance to digital marketing and marketing in general as a whole in the industry. And we are just about to roll out our content benchmarking report. We looked at over 300 manufacturing websites to see what content assets they had on them. And, we looked to see if they had a blog. Do they have a YouTube page? Are they active? Are they on social media? And do they have middle of funnel content? Do they have guides, checklists, white papers, configurators? Do they have case studies? Do they have testimonials? And the numbers were so incredibly low. And we ruled out really small companies because they just didn't, barely have anything.
Yeah.
But across the board, from 5 million over to over $100 million in revenue, the numbers were absurdly low. And I think well below 50% on so many measures, and in some we're down in the teens on some of these assets. And I was at the Advanced Manufacturing Expo a couple weeks ago, and we were walking around to some of the booths and talking to some of these manufacturers about what are you doing, because we had pre-scouted them. We had looked at the ones that were exhibiting at the show and just saw who didn't have any content assets. And man, they just like, the guard is up. They say they know they got to do it, but there's so many that aren't doing it. They are just kind of like in this state where, well, my competitors aren't doing it, I don't think I'm going to do it. And it's either that, or they're just afraid of it, or they don't understand it. And to me, it's like, well, yeah, your website is just as good as your competitors. But I think the whole idea behind this is to get ahead of the curve, right? To get ahead of the competition. So, we're going to share the results at a webinar. And to me, we're calling it a golden opportunity, because I just think that if somebody gets on this path that I know you're on and your clients are on, and so many of the marketers that are out there, Gorilla 76, True Marketing, Industrial Marketing, there's a lot of agencies, there's a lot of in-house agencies. These people are all on this path, and they are every day getting more and better results and getting better and better. And that's the thing, is like, we've got to get manufacturing to get started, because I'll tell you what, it's just not about new business and generating new leads. It's getting your brand out there to the world, to new recruits, right? To politicians, to community leaders. It's about getting out there. And, everybody thinks tech is so sexy. It's because it is. It's out there. The brand is alive. And if we can get the manufacturing industry to come alive online, like we're seeing so many of these great young influencers, and I'm 55, so I can say young influencers, like, Eddie Saunders Jr., Jake Hall, Megan Ziemba, Jacob Sanchez, Ian Stork. I mean, the list goes on about all these young people who are online and super passionate. We got to follow their lead, folks. And, this isn't me just saying like, I'm here for business. This is like, hey, this is your livelihood, and this is this industry. This is where the consumers are. 58% of the customer journey is completed before a meaningful sales interaction. So do your trade shows, but man, add on to that with digital marketing in general.
Right. And God, there's so much there to unpack, but I feel like, yes, there's a lot of fear. I see that with small to mid-sized manufacturers. I find that they're thinking digital marketing feels scary, don't necessarily understand it. It seems like there's just way too many things I'm supposed to be doing. I don't have time. I'm not a writer. What is it with all this content? And like you talked about, being of service to people is really what marketing is all about, right? We're promoting our brand promise. We're demonstrating our promise by showing up and offering you, whether it's, top of funnel, middle, bottom, whatever. I like to call it like the circle, the customer circle, right? Because they come in at some point and then they buy from you, and then hopefully you nurture them and they buy again, and they tell 2 friends, and so on and so on, like the old Fabergé commercial. So I think that's how I like to explain it, is it doesn't have to be confusing, but it's not something you can ignore. You can choose to, but my God, you're going to be left behind and like in the dust and coughing your ass off because everybody else went ahead of you. And you said something too that I think is important. Do you want to be just like your competition? Isn't the idea to get ahead of them? And I want to take that a step further and suggest maybe not even getting ahead, but veering off in your own lane. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Differentiating yourself. And something else you talked about in our last episode, which I loved, is you said you were doing content for a manufacturer. And I'm probably not going to tell the story just right, but the point is you discovered that they did this thing and they weren't talking about it. It wasn't necessarily, secret sauce. Gotta keep this under wraps. And you said, you guys are doing this special thing. And this is why this customer buys from you and no one else, because you're doing this thing. Why on earth aren't you talking about it? And they were just like dumbfounded. Well, I don't know. You said, talk about it, man. Like this is your thing. This is something that differentiates you. So
you know why? And you know why that's important, Allison, is because here's the deal. People are going to find out what you're doing. All these carefully guarded secrets are going to come out somehow. Somebody's going to find out about it, whether it's an ex-employee or it's a customer. Somebody else's engineer is going to come up with the idea. So you better own it. You better come out loud and proud, claim it as yours, because that's how people will remember you. And the other thing is what you're doing now is probably not going to be what you're doing in a year or 2 years from now, right? You're probably going to move on to something else, some new innovation. You're always going to be coming up with new things. So, don't worry about it. You're going to come up with, you're on this path. You're an innovator. You're always coming up with something new. So just own them as they come up. And, by the time your competition starts catching up to you with what you've got, okay, not only do you own mind share now, so they're the second best thing.
I love that word.
You're already up to the next innovation that you're talking about. There's a certain politician, and I'm not going to name his name, but see if you can figure this one out, who stays in front of everybody by coming up with new controversies. And you can never figure, while people are trying to address the last one, he's coming up with something new. Right. Same thing with marketing and same thing with business. It's like, you just got to stay ahead of everybody and keep on innovating. And for manufacturers, that should not be a chore because you are always trying to solve a new problem. It's like, and I know you know this, Allison, like we run into these engineering minds that freaking, make your head spin. They're like, the intellect and how their minds work just blows me away.
Yeah, it's like,
how did you do that? And it's stuff that's all around us in our lives, like this water bottle. Oh my God, how do you make that? How did you do that? It's really amazing once you're around these people and, you start to learn how they did that. And, so they have to leverage that and show that off and let the world know what they're coming up with. These are amazing stories that are being kept under wraps.
Yeah. But I think, or I should say not but, and That is why we recommend, you, I, like you said, all of our colleagues that are in marketing for manufacturers, we recommend that whoever you are as a manufacturer, you're brilliant, you're special. No one else has your story. No one else is doing exactly what you do, how you do it, right? What we do is we help you articulate what the hell that is. That's what we do. So if you can't do it for yourself, I mean, my God, I hire people to help us, right? Outside consultants. We don't do everything ourselves. Or if there's something that I don't feel I'm good at, I'm going to hire somebody. So I think that's the beautiful thing that we get to do every day, is we get to take this really mind-blowing mic drop thing that they do. And you know what's funny is a lot of times they take for granted what they do. And they'll say, oh, well, that's just boring. Like, everyone does it. I'm like, but do they do it that way? Well, no. Let's talk about that. And not just be part of the conversation. Like, don't just create content or have it created for content's sake. I always say, lead the conversation, right? You can be part of it, or you can just be a listener, right? A lot of 95% of people on LinkedIn are voyeurs.
Yeah.
5% of the people are the ones creating all the content that we see.
Yep.
That is a truth. Yeah. So do you want to be that company, that manufacturer, or do you want to have somebody help you put yourself out there who they can articulate it for you? They can bring it to life.
I think that is such a great point. And it kind of goes back to the old rule of writing. There's, for great writing, there's an old a rule you need to follow. It's show, don't tell. Okay, so I see a lot of manufacturers when we start like working on their website homepage, like, hey, we're the industry leader and we are the experts in the field. And I'm like, and you're nodding, it's like, well, of course you are. Everyone says
just
that.
Like everybody else.
You are telling, you are not showing. Now, when you show your expertise, that's a difference maker. And I think, to your point, I really like what you said about create your own path. You know, what you're innovating, again, this water bottle and how you did it, and that unique innovation, you know, that is going to cement into somebody's mind because they can visualize it. They see the proof. They trust you now because you did it. Okay. And you've showed it to them. And that's what content is all about. The content is the showing of your story and what makes you unique.
Right. And like we always talk about, the point too isn't to just talk about yourself, which again, we talked about this in our last episode together. You want to invite people into a story where they're the hero. So how are you showing them their hero state rather than talking about yourself and your 6 million square feet of, warehouse space and your 5,500 brand new Benford 5000, CNC machine. And like those things are great, but how is that impacting the person who will care? How is that going to impact your customer? How is that going to help them do their job better, faster? How are you helping them be smarter, more successful with their business? So, yeah, I think if I can toot one horn in your episode here, it would be to beg manufacturers to stop talking about yourself so much and try to flip the script. And again, that's what content creators, hopefully, like us, will help you do, is to just reframe it from the customer's perspective so that it's what's in it for me. Why should I buy this? why should I buy this from you?
Well, let's go back to the digital twin model and the ideal salesperson. So manufacturers, you rely on your sales team to generate business for you. Any sales leader will tell you that once you engage in a conversation, if you get a prospect, the first thing you're going to be talking about is them and not yourself.
Right.
You initially out of the gates, you're talking about their pain points, you're asking them questions, or if you're using like the challenger sale, you're speaking about, Allison, I know that you're not getting enough business, you're not, whatever their pain points are. And you're really speaking to them. And it's the conversation is all about them. And I think what you just said there about flipping it on your head, it's like, look, we are going to get to your products, no doubt about it. But we need, as we do our marketing and get our outreach out there, number one is we got to talk in that know you stage. We got to talk about the pain points. We got to talk about where they're struggling. And man, we got to, not only we have to talk about it, we got to tie it to like some of the bigger issues. Challenger sales really good about talking about the bigger problems. So like when we started doing the digital twin, we would talk about, yeah, look, 58% of the customer journeys taking place before, anybody even talks to one of your salespeople. So yeah, you need to get out there in the digital space. Hang on. That's not the big problem though. That's only part of the problem. The bigger problem is when you get sales and marketing and they're not in alignment. And so just putting content out there, you might get people to your site, you might get leads, and they're no good. So now, not only are you spending money on your marketing, but you're actually losing money because your leads aren't closing. So you have to bring that sales and marketing effort together. Yep. Otherwise, you could experience 4% loss in revenue or more because you're spending all this money, it's going nowhere. So that's when we're talking about when you're trying to get those pain points out there. Don't just talk about the pain points your product solves. Talk about how it helps them in a larger scale.
Exactly. Okay. So everybody, I think you already know the next time Greg is on this podcast, we are going to be talking about bridging the gap, right? De-siloing sales and marketing. I'm already putting it out there. You're also going to be hearing a lot more from Greg on this topic in the future. And I can't tell you exactly how and when, but it's coming soon. And we have to wrap up, man. I'm always so sad at the end of every episode because there's just so much that we can cover. But I have to say, in looking at our last episode 3 years ago, I have come to the conclusion that you do not age because you look exactly the same. I'm like, damn it.
Well,
incredible.
The same to you, Allison. I mean, you're looking fantastic as always. And this is all AI generated.
Right.
Yeah. I'm really a hunched over, wrinkled old prune right now. So.
Oh, Greg Mischio, I adore you. And for anybody that's not already following him on LinkedIn, for sure, you've got to do that. Connect with him and check out all of his amazing videos on the Manufacturing Masters podcast. They are so good and to the point, no fluff. I call all those videos on the platform fat-free yet filling. And also follow Windbound because you guys are putting out amazing content and showing right how digital marketing can help your business. So thank you, my friend. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Allison. Always a pleasure. And I love chatting with you. This is fun. This is not work. This is fun.
Exactly. All right. Well, until next time. High five,
if you're not
everybody.
already, Subscribe to the Manufacturing Masters podcast on Apple Music or Spotify. And for a deeper dive, head on over to manufacturing-masters.com. It's everything they never taught you in school.